The boys at The Athletic are doing the right thing. They're asking questions. A freedom of information request.
A very useful tool in this day and age.
Yes, was submitted by The Athletic. It requested all the correspondence between the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the British Embassy in Abu Dhabi.
Yes. Relating
to, you guessed it, the 115 charges being faced by Manchester City. They relate to the charges. They're like, okay, we want more information on this. The British government, what do you know, refused to disclose the information.
I blame them.
About Foreign Office correspondence relating to City's charges for these 115 alleged breaches of Premier League rules. So The Athletic, try as they might, didn't really get anywhere with this. Should they have? I mean, after pushing to get information, the door was shut in their face.
Look, you're going to argue the position of a journalist should be doing precisely this and creating substance to this story.
Well, why the government hiding here?
Well, because it's political conversations that are not necessarily the precinct of sport, and the 115 charges are either stand-upable or they're not stand-upable. And the conversations between the British government and the government of the UAE are probably not as relevant as we would like them to think, as we might like them to think they may well be. But I understand that your term and say, well, until we see that information,
yes,
we're not going to know this.
Exactly.
And of course, it's a journalist going, okay, we've been privy to the fact that Mohammed bin Salman, a completely different scenario entirely, apparently leant upon Boris Johnson or asked Boris Johnson to intervene in the acquisition of Newcastle.
They did, yeah.
The context of that conversation, the substance behind it, the real world of how things are held together are probably not unrealistic to expect people to have conversations when something like that is going on. But what we're seeing here now is, I don't understand, are the Premier League capable of administering the prerequisite justice for these 115 charges, or is there a suggestion that they won't be able to do that because they'll have the government lent upon them?
Yeah, but why would our government be talking to the
Who
people
knows?
in Abu Dhabi about the 115 alleged charges?
Who knows? And how do we know that they are?
And how would this be sensitive?
No, but how do
in terms of our relationship with Abu Dhabi?
How do we know that they are talking specifically about this?
Well, they're not releasing the information to the Athletic.
To say that they are or they aren't. The Athletic of... have we got a smoking gun that says we've got confirmation that this particular government department or this embassy or this particular function within governance...
Well, the government say this. And this is why they're saying, thanks for your inquiry, The Athletic, but we're going to do nothing about it. And they say, we acknowledge that releasing information on this issue would increase public knowledge about our relations with the UAE.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
It's a fishing expedition.
The disclosure of information detailing our relationship with the UAE could potentially damage the bilateral relationship between the UK and the UAE.
Because there may be, I mean, I don't know what's been said, neither does The Athletic, and I don't know why The Athletic is asking that particular function in the first place. Did they get told that there's a specific conversation that's gone on between this function and the United Arab Emirates about the subject matter?
It's clear if they grant a freedom of information request, there might be a bunch of information that comes out, the British government having granted it, that might not show the UAE in the best possible light. Because for Abu Dhabi, read Manchester City, and for Manchester City, read Abu Dhabi. Yeah. And we're talking about 115 alleged charges.
And what you might find is that what you get coming out is that there's a hugely redacted document that contains no information. My point is this.
It's too easy for the request to be not given, isn't it?
Well, there's a sense
too easy for the request to be refused.
What the Athletic is doing is, and you will argue as a journalist, is building a story and looking to stand it up. Now, I don't know why they would necessarily assume that there is a series of conversations that are specific between a government function and the UAE's ambassador or whoever it is in the UAE about this subject matter. What they're doing is they're fishing to see if there was one. And as a result of that, the government have pushed back and say, we're not prepared to disclose this conversation or any other conversation because it may result in damage between us and the UAE.
And the next question, quite relevantly, would be, well, why is that then? What have you got to hide?
Well, again, because it's none of football's business, I suspect. the Athletic are not creating a story because they're looking after the well-being of football. They're creating a story because they want to be able to pull at a thread to see if they can build some substance behind their story that the Premier League perhaps is not an independent organisation and that the government influences it. But this is not a conversation between the Premier League and the government. This is a conversation between two political entities that, to some extent, some of the nature of politics means that certain things aren't going to find their way into the public domain. Now, whether you like that or you don't like it, that's probably the reality of how politics at times operates.
It is, just as it did when the Saudis got in touch with Boris Johnson, your mate, to put pressure on the Premier League to approve the Newcastle takeover.
That was the assumption that was made. And that was the assumption.
Wasn't denied.
Well, you can only put pressure on somebody if you think you've got leverage. We've got, on one hand, we've got a government that condemns certain actions whilst supplying military weapons to the Saudi Arabians to drop bombs on Yemen. So we do have to be careful about the hypocrisy of how our government could say, or how our Premier League could say, we're not having somebody buy one of our football clubs because of their human rights issues, and our government has told us that's a particular potential problem, whilst our government sends, sells bombs to the Saudis to be able to achieve those things against Yemen. I'm in the camp of saying, look, the 115 charges is one thing.
Alleged. Yeah.
The 115 charges are facts.
Right.
Whether they're guilty of them is at the moment is a discussion. The 115 charges that Man City have to face have really very little to do with a discussion between the UAE and the government, unless we're trying to build some bridge to suggest that the government has undue influence over the Premier League. And there's no reason to believe that.
So release the information.
But there's political reasons perhaps why they don't want to, and that's not the business of football. We're not going to use football to grandstand its own particular agenda to create political tensions. Why would any government want to create political tensions so that a football magazine can grandstand off the back of it?
Maybe it's because our government, our lot, are having conversations with Abu Dhabi about the 115 charges.
But let me ask you a question. Is that relevant to the Premier League's ability to act as an independent body and to be able to make their own decisions?
Well, it brings back the question of influence, doesn't it?
Is there any indication that influence has been brought to bear over the Premier League by the government in the past?
Yes.
On what basis?
The Saudi takeover,
No.
the conversation with Boris.
No, that's a conversation that we don't know had anywhere further to go. We don't know if Boris then made a phone call to Richard Masters. We don't know if political pressure was put on by the DCMS to create an outcome. What we do know is there was no playbook inside the Premier League to stop the Saudis from owning that football club. But the only thing that stopped them was piracy. And the reasons why it stopped is because piracy stopped.
Yeah, but
I'm not defending the government. And Boris Johnson, by the way, is not my mate. I think he's a class clown.
Good man.
All right.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.